Guys for coming in. We're just going to take some general questions, talk about SIP security or, pretty much anything, motorcycles, Vegas, slot machines. I'm J.R. Richardson. Did a couple of presentations on using fail-to-ban, automated hacker mitigation, putting in access lists into Cisco gateway routers. So I'm very familiar with those topics as a service provider for hosted PBX systems. Take it away, Philip.
I am Philip. I do tutorials on hacking. Help set up some of the nice VMs at the back that you can continue hacking on today if you wish.
Hi, my name is Flavio. I develop soft switches. I work with OpenSIPs to NSPC to protect.
Flavio, you have to turn your microphone on.
This is Flavio. He does not know where the on button is.
He's not from around here. He's from Brazil.
Sorry.
Okay, it's on.
Oh, no?
Tap, tap.
Good. Well, my name is Flavio. I develop soft switch systems. I work with equipment. I'll do it right sometime. And I work with some systems to protect Asterisk, like redirect servers, fraud detection systems. That's more or less what I do.
Okay, so that's the panel here.
Since you're developing systems, this isn't really directed towards you, mostly to the other two guys. For your respective infrastructures, what are some of the biggest challenges you guys come across fighting fraud on a daily basis?
For my infrastructure, I'm kind of spoiled in that the majority of my customers are on net to me, so I just have to worry about internal hacking. Some errant IT guy who wants to see if he can exploit his service provider for some personal gain, but typically I'm not internally. I'm not getting attacked. I do have some open systems to the public internet. That some home office users, very small, just a few hundred, couple hundred endpoints might be registering from. So I have to manage access lists to allow pretty much whitelist those users and blacklist everybody else because they're home DSL cable modem users. I don't specifically allow their specific IP address because cable modem will reboot. They'll get a different IP for a typical residential service. They may have to call back up and allow access further on. So I'll generally expand the block to the service provider that they're at, dedicated to their business IP address for their PBX. And that does open up a large segment of the internet to get attacks. But my fail-to-ban scripts run pretty good and regular, and haven't had too many issues there.
Yeah. I work on a larger global scale. I provide service in 70 different countries for major carriers. I see roughly nearly 30 gigs a week in hack attempts, and that's just SIP reg packets, option packets. As you can imagine, that's a grotesquely large amount. Most of our customers have prepaid set limits on in case any of them do get compromised. We also have constant running analytics on usage patterns. So if somebody all of a sudden starts getting weird spikes, it will stop those calls and the customer will get notified. And yeah, as a whole, doing security on a public level, you can't shut down the world. You have to let the world in because you have customers in China, in New Zealand, in Australia, in Canada, the US. You just really have to be diligent about knowing if your customers do get popped, what limitations you have in place to prevent that customer racking up the bill. So that's all I have to say about that. Yeah.
Pain. No, I was just saying I'm definitely in the same boat, so I feel his pain. I mean, no matter how much you try, I mean, securing your infrastructure is just not the only piece that needs to be secured, because you have the customer end that they might not necessarily be securing. So monitoring that, even the traffic flow coming in over the wire, I think is extremely important.
Yeah, it's very important that you have those soft caps and monitoring systems in place to actually help the user in case they are owned. Because a lot of cases, it's not you that's failed, it's the customer that's done something silly. Like they've had their IT guy forward something and somebody plucks a password out of the phone. So, thank you for the question.
This is the moment you got to take advantage of.
Over there?
Oh, okay. Let me see how fast I can get over there.
You know, at this conference, there's been a lot of talk of WebRTC and securing the streams and all that good stuff. My concern is not even with the streams, but since everything's going to be browser-based, and there's 1,000,001 vulnerabilities that people introduce from Smiley Central, WeatherBug, all that good stuff, what can we do to prevent someone from exploiting the actual browser to gain their credentials and then just log in without hacking anything?
That is a completely different ballgame. I wouldn't even touch that question with a 10,000-foot pole.
Keep the media out of the browser. Browser was not meant to be a media service, so.
Make it for internal calls only.
I think you have to monitor the behavior of the user. It's the only thing that it's the same for IP phones, soft phones, or web phones, let's say. With the behavior, you can detect strange patterns and block the user in the beginning, or at least in the middle of the attack. So I think more and more the behavior will be important on VoIP.
And always limit your channels.
Yeah, and limit the channels, limit the prepaid accounts help a lot. I wouldn't send my international routes to a route that it's not prepaid. It's crazy. To have a TDM trunk open for international routes is simply, I can't sleep doing this. Yeah, actually that's was my problem. For a long time I didn't sleep. All Saturdays checking the CR, checking everything to make sure that you don't get, it can cost you a car in a weekend. Yeah, you don't drive your car to the wall and without an insurance, but you run a PBX with a TDM trunk. Yeah, open to the internet and sometimes with international rates. So that's really something that study the behavior, try to reduce the damage.
Yep.
Questions? Raise your hand high. I see it.
So, is there any big websites out there with statistics on what kind of attacks are most prevalent, or times when these are happening, or anything like that?
There's a lot of sites with exploits that get published, but as far as statistical data, those tend to fall more towards the vendors that sell security products, which I tend not to give 2 cents about. Jared, do you know more on that?
Flavio, do you have a slide that spoke to that?
Yeah, there's a project in Brazil called the honeytarg.cert.br. It's a project run by several companies, public companies, most of them. And they run honeypots for free for this project. And they have statistics every month about the attacks on all the ports. They are generic statistics. There are some guys on the internet that publish the blacklists and some data about their honeypots too, right? So there are some places. Honeytarg.cert.br is usually a place where I go when I want some information about the honeypots. They can show at least which ports they are attacking right now. And SIP is now the most attacked port by far, by 100 times.
Best thing to do is always keep an eye on the exploit websites. So then if you see something come out right away, it's best to address it, like if there's a new flaw in Apache that, lets you do some sort of memory crash on it that gives you shell. you're obviously going to see a whole bunch of attacks shortly after because other hackers actually check those sites. So,
It's an interesting idea. It's really hard to spot what's next. As I said, you get hacked once and then
you're done.
you patch that and then you go to the next level and the next level and then wait for the next thing.
Yeah,
Right.
mitigating your risk is about your best thing you can do.
And these attacks go usually in waves. And this year in April, there was lots and lots of attacks to the vTiger CRM interface. Probably hundreds of websites defaced. So you have waves of attacks. SIP issues in 2010 and 2011. Probably they will find something else because, let's see, after the SIP issues, they installed fail to ban. So SIP issue is not a problem anymore for most people.
Or even
Yeah.
always reject all.
It's always reject.
Yeah.
But now they say, hey, there are a lot of phones, so probably phones are the next line. After phones, the web interfaces, and then WebRTC maybe in the future. So
Did anybody see the Showdown website from when they were doing it and you actually pulled up a GrandStream or a Polycom that was right on that website? You might want to check if your stuff is in there. First hit, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
have you tried right click on the page to see the password?
yeah. So there's
Some older firmwares, you can simply do a right click and go there and check the
the
password.
SIP passwords and stuff. So there's money to be made on the opposite side. This is the side where we don't make money. This is where we prevent the money loss.
Yeah.
Yeah, limit your attack vector, close your ports.
Are there any lists of IP addresses that are known to be hackers that you can automatically block?
Yeah, there's a couple of projects out there, Project Honeypot and a couple others that they'll pull that information, but you have to, where do they get that information? You have to put something on your system to ship your log files out to them, on the critical stuff. But then what are you going to do with that? They gotta ship that information back to you so you can.
They
do
don't use
something with
DNS lookups for that? Like spam?
Spam house.
it. Spam house, you can do stuff like that. Yeah. So
I mean,
project-
isn't that the method for doing it? You do a lookup and it says yes or no?
You can do that, and then you can also get the total list. But those lists you're just going to get a ton of false positives because they're mostly botnets that are, compromised computers. So you're blocking grandma and grandpa in Idaho, but okay, you just blocked their
Dynamic
hacked
IP.
PC.
Yeah.
But what's that? That's going to alleviate the attack immediately, but it's going to come back around. So you really have to be proactive. I wouldn't trust. I personally don't trust other repositories. I just take care of everything myself.
There's no human curation on that. It wouldn't be possible. It'd be too fast. So like grandma's dynamic IP is a good example. Yeah, I mean, something might have happened. Somebody might have taken over, and then that might even not be the same IP. So
Right.
how long before they expire? Say problem with the spam block list. It's depends on how long they keep it. It becomes more overhead than it's worth.
Yeah, you'd have hundreds of thousands of entries in, IP tables or something that would make your box
Exactly.
pretty doggy.
But it's interesting to create a honeypot and check all the time because I would say some interesting things right now that looking at the traffic, because I look at the traffic all the weeks. There's a single B class responsible for 50% of the attacks. Yeah, it's 30, I think it's 37.8. Half of the attacks come from this. And actually, this hacker has the whole B class because he changes the address every day in the same B class, right? So if you want to block the whole B class.
What about AWS though? Amazon stuff like or EC2? I mean,
Yep.
same thing, right? Big time VoIP trouble with that.
Yeah.
Yep.
And the second thing is dial-in number. I would say that half of the hacking attempts on the last 3 or 4 months goes to the 972 something, right? So it's interesting. When you have a honeypot, you can go there and check every day. And then it's very easy to build. You can build using Asterisk. You can build using OpenSIPs. It's not something hard to do.
But the honeypots really just they get the bots and the script kiddies who don't get the hardcore ones.
Yeah, true. These guys are
Like the little 12-year-old in Asia that's just downloaded Backtrack and he wants to go try and hack a network.
Okay, but you can see the persistent ones. They try every day. And you know from where in the world they are doing it, it's probably the same people. Right? But you got to spot when and where they are attacking. Because if you leave it open, in 3-4 hours, your server is going to be hacked. Right? So there are someone there doing every day, scanning the whole internet.
Yep.
Right? So there are a few addresses that deserves to be blocked. A whole B class, maybe a whole.
Well, there is common
Valid
sense.
number.
If you're not doing business in country X, just block the country,
Yes, true.
right? There's no, if your customers are in, I don't know, Brazil, you don't have anybody in America that's connecting, just block America.
Yeah, true. You can do GeoIP location of the IP address and block by country.
Yeah.
Unless you have a salesman that takes his laptop to
Travels.
America.
Then you add an allow IP if he has to call in.
Yep.
Ask him to call using his cell phone and don't bother.
Yep.
It's cheaper than to have a fraud.
Yeah. PFSense is pretty good too because has anybody seen PFSense?
Excellent.
Yeah, it's a fantastic open source firewall and has a numerous amount of packages in there. It has SNOT, which is an IDS IPS, so it can actually block people that are even just doing port scans. So right at the port scan level, they'll get blocked. It also has a SIP proxy built in, which is really nice, and has additional packages that let you block by country, which is also fantastic. So that makes your life easy.
Next question. I've got a quick one since I don't see any hands. Any hands? Would you guys, do you think that there's the most juicy target for this kind of, in other words, is there like the steak? Because a lot of targets are really, there's not that much to offer. It's just people screwing around.
No,
But
ISPs.
what do they go after?
ISPs. If you're a known telephony service provider, you're getting pounded day in, day out, never stops.
So that's number one.
That's number one. And then the rest are the port scans that come up with a UDP 5060 return, and then they'll concentrate on that, focus on it for a while, see if they can exploit it.
If I was to choose targets as a hacker, I'd choose Amazon, OVH, other large hosting companies that throw up VPSs, because everybody that wants an Asterisk box or something cheap online, that's where they go. They buy a cheap VPS and they throw up, free PBX or Elastics.
And in the last couple of years, that went from having Amazon and one or two other VPS Net and a couple other cheap things to like 100 people, maybe 200 companies offering VPS instant setup.
Oh, there's
blah,
thousands.
blah, blah. I don't know, PayPal probably.
Like, it's a big planet. There's thousands, right? You don't just have to target this continent. There's other continents doing it.
Yeah.
Like, France is pretty massive for hosting, surprisingly. And so is a lot of Eastern Europe now. It's growing in size.
No limit to it.
Nope.
Questions? This is going to take a second.
I didn't hear that. Speak
What?
into the mic.
Why do service providers pay toll fraud?
They told, what?
Pay toll fraud.
Well, like, if their customer gets hacked, why do they pay their bill?
I mean, when they know that these are just, high toll rate areas that are made just for this, how's it all actually work on
Well-
the back end?
So the old premium number thing, when you hack a box and then you're making calls to premium numbers, the premium number guy, eventually it gets paid first, and then the bill works its way back through the PSTN, all the carriers. And so I guess it's just a point where one of the carriers in the middle has got to be smart enough to recognize that these are not good calls or good toll calls. The carrier, one of the carriers I deal with, if they get a high target premium number termination call from my network, I get an email immediately. So a call hits, I don't know, what's the one of the Virgin Islands or something, bunch of premium numbers down there. I get an email and I can track down the call and figure out it was a compromised Cisco Call Manager Express that an integrator had put on, and I was doing a SIP trunk to. So we can, so yeah, the carriers do help me personally. I've seen that relationship be beneficial where they're doing higher level screening than I am.
As far as having to pay it, many are mandated by CLEC and ILEC contracts that
Yeah.
they have to pay for their interconnects and whatnot.
But
So,
it depends.
Brazil is different?
In Brazil is different. Telefonica don't do anything about it. They'll let you have a, actually there's a,
Telefonica is Telmex, so
Telefonica is, no, it's not Telmex. Telmex is Embratel.
it's not
There.
Carlos Slim, is it?
Carlos Slim is the owner of Embratel and Claro, two of the big companies. They actually don't do anything about fraud. They just cash it. They just send the bill, and in many cases goes to the court system, right? And it's funny. I was hearing about CFCA here and say, hey, these guys are not paying, but they are going to the court to charge the customer in many cases. So, and it's really hard to track because Telefonica buys the international from another carrier that buys from another carrier until the end. So the hacker takes the money in 7 days, and then you have all this mess of several service providers to discover who is receiving the money to give to the hacker. So it's very hard to spot. Maybe here you have a better prevention system, but there you can. I heard a case. I haven't checked it there, but almost $500,000 for a single provider, right? It's in a court system. It will take forever to judge, but if they judge, if the judgment is not favorable, they will close out.
You actually find that a lot of the smaller resellers have a lot better protection than the tier 1 carriers.
Yeah.
Because the tier 1 carriers, they just don't care. They're like, yeah, give us all the traffic, we'll bill you.
Yeah, true. That's what happened there.
You had a question? Oh, you're stretching.
More hands? Did I see a hand up there?
Scratching his
No?
head.
Do you guys see many false positives? JR, you're talking about how you get an email, blah, blah, blah. I have that too running on my server, but we're very low key, so it's not a problem. I see file change emails. I run a cron job that looks at the server every 5-10 minutes. But we don't have a problem with that. But in your system, do you see many false positives where some legit thing is disconnected? You have to act quickly?
No, we take care of 100% of the telephony services for our customers. We provision the phones. Every now and again, I'll get a phone that one of the techs fat fingered the password. So it'll be, and it'll be on net. So the phone's sitting there trying to register, and I'll get a bunch of emails. I got to call them, hey, can you go set the password on that phone? It wasn't right. I'll get that from time to time, maybe once or twice a month. I'll get phones that went off site to a home office, cable modem reboots in the middle of the night or something, lost power, comes back up on a different IP address. I can tell from the email that I get that it was extension 1004 on this PBX, tried to register. I'll recognize it as an off-net. Usually I recognize a lot of the customers' IP addresses because I'm the one that's in there doing the access list. So I can remember, yeah, this customer did have an off-net user. They do have extension 101 or 1004. I'll jump in the system, modify the access list tables. The phone will re-register even before the customer knows it. So it's beneficial for me in my whitelisting efforts to get those emails, and they are false positives, but because the way my system works, they will get blocked inadvertently, and we take care of it usually before the customer does.
I rarely ever get them. I've set up my metrics that if people are just generally, they've got a busted IP phone or whatnot, it's not going to trip up the full, blockage that a hack would. And that's how I deal with that, because I'm dealing with everybody that's public. I don't have a closed network. Otherwise, I'd be, there all day dealing with customers.
I highly recommend a closed network.
I recommend open, with open source.
Yeah, but for false positives on fraud, it blocks, so it's hard to say because this usually goes to the tech support, and we don't have
Yeah.
a lot of we don't know a lot about this. But For malformed packets, we have a lot of false positives. There's lots of malformed packets coming from legitimate devices, like cancels without some headers. It's very hard to create a system that for fuzzy attacks where you receive malformed packets, because many phones just send malformed packets. So for some things, like floating, sometimes you have a big call center, it surpasses your anti-floating system, then you have to increase. So there are some, for DOS malformed packets, there's a lot of false positives.
Yeah.
This is for JR. You keep talking about the closed networks. So how do you deal with soft phones? I mean, we all know that the hard phones are in particular locations, but people run around with soft phones on their smartphones and laptops. You can't just, see the IP address that they're registering from and go into your whitelist and add it to them. It's just very inefficient. How do you deal with that?
Very
problem?
inefficient. I just don't allow soft phones. That's just the type of, I mean, we're a business service provider, so most of my customers, almost all my customers, they want that phone on the desk, and that's where it's pretty much going to stay, or they want a home phone at the office. Every now and again, I'll get a customer that wants a soft phone, he wants to travel, or he just wants a soft phone on his computer, and if they pay me enough, I'll go ahead and let them install one and give them the credentials to register back and tie those extensions together. But at the same time, I explain him about hacking and the internet, and if he travels off-site, he will have to call in and tell me his public IP before I allow him. And if he if he wants to pay me a whole lot of money, I will go ahead and wide open their PBX and let them and put the onus back on them that, hey, you're vulnerable. This is your risk. If you want to take it, and that bill comes in, you will be paying it, or I will turn you off. So, I mean, it's not a good situation for them. It's not a good situation for me either. But I have to protect the company, and to my best ability, I have to protect them as much as I can as well. So when they want to do it, if they pay for it, they can have all the abuse they want.
Anyone? Here's something that hasn't been said as far as I know in any of the sessions, and that was that since most problems happen from somebody on the inside, are you all the only person who has access to the server? The question being, you may have an untrusted associate, probably you're not going to give them complete access, but isn't that a little bit of a problem, or are you all one-person operations, or what?
No, I have many people, techs getting into the PBXs, doing things, but I oversee the whole operation, so I'm constantly going back, looking at, I have logs of all the transactions that happen on the systems, so I monitor the logs from time to time, and they're trusted employees. Customers don't access any of my systems. They are we do 100%. We're a boutique telecom shop, so we're a complete turnkey solution. So the customer gets the phone on their desk, and that's about it. They call us to make changes to any parameters that they might need changes for, but we're set up to do that. We have a lot of emails coming in, change caller IDs, reset voicemail passwords, but that's real simple stuff to do, and it takes just a few seconds to do, and we're set up to do just that. So we're very successful in that respect, but I don't have to worry about too many people getting in, because we close even our access is extremely locked down. So you have to have proper credentials before you can access. You have to be coming from the proper IP and have the proper credentials to access any of my systems.
If you're just continuing that question with you, JR, for a second. If you're on vacation, I'm pretty sure I know that wherever you are, you need to be able to access your server. So
Yeah.
you're coming in from an IP in Hawaii or wherever it is you go fishing or whatever. What do you have to do? You have a way that, I'll tell you how I solve it. It's pretty obvious, is that I have a dedicated server someplace else, and I use that as a proxy if I need to get in, because you can only SSH into our machine from a couple of IPs. What do you do, though? You have the same problem if you're not there.
It's pretty much the same thing. So we have a couple of strategic servers out there that do allow SSH, and of course we obscure the port, and then we only allow certain IPs up to it, people from home. And then there's a couple of errant servers that are wide open that we can access from anywhere, and you
And they
have to
can't do
have-
anything dangerous, obviously.
No, they're just sitting there as access proxies. So we get into those, and then from there we have access into other servers, and then we for media stuff, or we can do reverse SSH tunnels and open ports and get to where we need to work from.
I'm happy to know that what I do is right.
Yeah.
You other guys having a comment on the trusting employees, circle of trust, people who work for you, or vacationing in Hawaii?
The
Yeah.
employees get limited access to only the functions that they need, and remote access is only from certain IPs unless you're going through another box, which it's limited to. So yeah, it's very similar.
Well, we have auditing on the system, because actually my biggest concern is as we provide systems, sometimes they ask, hey, change the routing, change the routes for me, or change the rates. And I say, we never do it, because it's the liability to change a route is too high. But sometimes the customer, hey, you have changed the route. So we need to have the audit trail for all the operations to make sure that no one has changed anything on the customer system. So we have some policies for employees in terms of what they can do in a customer system, what they shouldn't do in any way. And at least two things they can do it in any way: change routes or change rates. Because this is about money, and if you change a route in the wrong way, you can lose a lot of money, so we don't want to be liable for this.
Okay, well, thanks to the fact that I'm never at a loss for words, we made it to 4 o'clock, and I think that's the time when we quit. You can always see these gentlemen at the end. Thank you, guys. This has been a great opportunity for everybody. Don't forget to...